In the sun-drenched valley of Silver Creek, Wyoming, where wild horses still roam free and old ranch traditions run deep as mountain roots, a storm is brewing that will shake this peaceful community to its core. Sarah Mitchell, whose skilled hands guide both rescue horses and the daily operations of the Broken Sage Ranch, appears to be nothing more than a devoted daughter helping her father preserve their family legacy. But beneath her quiet competence lies a past few could imagine. 6 years as a Marine Force Recon specialist with the highest marksmanship scores in her unit's history. When the notorious Steel Serpents motorcycle club sets their sights on her family's land, they'll learn too late that some daughters aren't just taught to ride horses, they're trained to wage war. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun paints long shadows across the Broken Sage Ranch as Sarah Mitchell moves through her daily routine with practiced precision. Her boots leave careful impressions in the Wyoming dust as she approaches the rehabilitation paddock, where a newly rescued mustang watches her with wary eyes. Every movement she makes carries a deliberate grace, though few would recognize it as anything more than the careful approach of an experienced horse trainer. "Easy there, Storm," she murmurs, her voice carrying that peculiar softness that makes even the wildest horses pause and listen. The mustang's ears flick forward, then back, uncertain but intrigued. Through the stable entrance, Marcus Chen, one of their regular ranch hands, watches with quiet admiration. "How do you do that?" he asks, stepping closer but maintaining a respectful distance from the nervous horse. "Get them to trust you so quickly," Sarah continues her methodical approach, each step calculated yet appearing completely natural. "Horses understand intention better than any human ever could," she explains, her eyes never leaving the mustang. "They know when you're hiding something, when you're nervous, when you're not being true to yourself." The morning light catches the faint scar along her jawline, a reminder of another life that few in Silver Creek know about. Her father, James Mitchell, is one of those few. A Vietnam veteran himself, he understood when his only daughter came home from her last deployment with shadows in her eyes that had nothing to do with the Wyoming sunset. A truck engine rumbles in the distance, and Sarah's head turns slightly, tracking the sound with unconscious precision. Her stance shifts imperceptibly, maintaining clear sight lines to both the stable entrance and the main road. Old habits, carefully masked but never truly forgotten. "Just Cal," she says softly, identifying the distinctive sound of their veterinarian's approaching vehicle. "Running early today." Marcus raises an eyebrow, impressed but unsure why. "You can tell our trucks apart?" Sarah offers a slight smile. That doesn't quite reach her eyes. "Small ranch. You get to know the rhythms." The stable door creaks open as Dr. Cal Thompson enters, carrying his medical bag and wearing a troubled expression that immediately catches Sarah's attention. Her hand stills on Storm's neck, though her outward appearance remains calm. "Morning, Sarah," Cal says, his voice carrying an edge of concern. "Your father around. Got some news you both need to hear." Sarah's fingers continue their gentle strokes along Storm's neck, but her mind is already calculating possibilities, assessing potential threats, habits drilled into her through years of training and combat experience. "He's checking the north pasture fence line. Should be back soon. Anything I should be worried about?" Cal sets his bag down, glancing toward the main road before speaking. "Trouble over in Rock Springs. New motorcycle club moving into the area. Been causing problems for some of the smaller ranches, making offers that aren't really offers." Sarah processes this information with the same quiet efficiency she once used to analyze mission intelligence. "The Steel Serpents," she says, not a question. She's heard whispers in town, seen the subtle changes in local traffic patterns, noticed the increasing frequency of unfamiliar vehicles on the county roads. "You've heard of them?" Cal asks, surprise evident in his voice. "I pay attention," Sarah replies simply, though her mind is already mapping contingencies, identifying vulnerable points along their property, calculating response times to various scenarios. 6 years in Force Recon taught her that information is often the best weapon, and peace is most effectively maintained through careful preparation. A motorcycle's distant roar echoes off the valley walls, the sound out of place in their quiet corner of Wyoming. Storm's ears prick forward, but Sarah's gentle hand maintains the horse's calm. Marcus shifts uncomfortably, but Sarah remains still, only her eyes moving as she tracks the sound's direction and probable route. "They're getting bolder," Cal observes, his voice low. "Sheriff Harrison says they've already bought out 2 properties down south. Those who refused their offers had unfortunate accidents." Sarah absorbs this information with outward calm, though her mind is already shifting into a gear she hasn't needed to use since leaving the Marines. "Thank you for the warning, Cal. I'll let Dad know when he gets back." As the veterinarian returns to his truck, Sarah's hand moves unconsciously to her lower back, where a small scar marks the place a piece of shrapnel once reminded her that peace must sometimes be defended with violence. In the distance, more motorcycle engines growl, their sound carrying a promise of approaching conflict. Marcus watches her with growing concern. "Miss Mitchell, if there's trouble coming..." Then we'll handle it," Sarah interrupts gently, her voice carrying that quiet certainty that makes people instinctively trust her judgment. What Marcus doesn't see is the tactical assessment already running behind her calm expression, the mental inventory of resources and capabilities, the strategic evaluation of terrain and defensive positions. The morning sun climbs higher over the broken sage ranch, casting shadows that stretch like fingers across the peaceful valley. Sarah returns to working with Storm, each movement still measured, still precise, but now carrying an additional layer of awareness. The Marines taught her that the best defenders are those who appear to need no defense, and that the most dangerous predators are often those who've learned to move among prey without causing alarm. In the distance, another motorcycle's growl echoes off the mountains, a sound out of place in their quiet valley. But Sarah Mitchell continues her work, outwardly peaceful, inwardly alert. After all, some daughters aren't just taught to ride. Horses, they're trained to recognize the approach of wolves and remember exactly how to deal with them. Sarah brings Storm back to his stall, just as her father's truck pulls up to the main house. James Mitchell steps down with the careful movement of a man who's carried too many burdens, both visible and hidden. At 62, he still maintains the straight-back posture from his military days, though his hair has gone completely silver. His weathered face tightens slightly as he spots Cal's retreating truck. "Everything all right with the new Mustang?" he asks, but his tone suggests he knows this morning's vet visit carried different news. Sarah matches his stride as they walk toward the house, her movement unconsciously mirroring his military bearing. "Storm's fine. Cal brought news about the Steel Serpents. They're moving closer, working their way through rock springs." James pauses at the porch steps, his hand resting on the weathered railing. "Harrison mentioned something about them last week, said they're not your typical motorcycle club." "No," Sarah agrees, her voice carrying that measured tone she developed during mission briefings. Their pattern suggests military background, systematic approach, coordinated movements, strategic targeting of key properties. Her father studies her face, recognizing the analytical expression she wears. It's the same look she had during their satellite calls when she was deployed, always careful with details, but unable to completely hide her tactical mindset from someone who shared it. "You've been tracking them," he states, rather than asks. Sarah nods slightly. 3 months of increasing activity, started with small properties near the state line, then expanded. "They're building a corridor, Dad. Our ranch would be a prime target, remote enough for privacy, good road access, strategic location between major highways. Inside the house, Sarah moves to the kitchen window, her position offering clear views of both the main drive and the stable area. Old habits. Her father watches her, seeing not just his daughter, but the Marine she became, the warrior she still is beneath her peaceful exterior. I've seen how they operate, she continues, her voice low. They start with offers, supposedly generous ones. When those get refused, accidents happen, equipment failures, mysterious fires, spooked livestock. They pressure from all angles until selling becomes the only viable option. James settles into his chair at the kitchen table, his eyes never leaving his daughter. And you think they're coming here next? I know they are. Sarah turns from the window, her stance shifting subtly. Spotted their scouts yesterday. 2 bikes running the ridgeline, checking approaches. Professional work, if a bit obvious, they're evaluating security, looking for weaknesses. The sound of approaching vehicles draws their attention. Through the window, they watch 3 trucks pull up to the stable, ranch hands arriving for the morning shift. Sarah identifies each by engine sound before they come into view. Marcus's old Ford, the Tanner twins' shared Chevy, and Lisa Whitehorse's ranch-battered Dodge. Good people, James observes, loyal. Which is why we need to be ready, Sarah replies. The Serpents won't just threaten us, they'll go after everyone connected to the ranch. We need to protect our people. A motorcycle roars past on the main road, the sound deliberately aggressive. Sarah tracks it without seeming to move, noting speed, direction, and the distinctive modifications to the exhaust system. Reynolds, 547 custom pipes, she murmurs. Popular with ex-military riders, confirms what I suspected about their background. James watches his daughter, remembering the little girl who used to braid the horses' manes and dream of barrel racing. Now she analyzes engine sounds for tactical intelligence, just as he once tracked enemy movements through jungle canopy. The weight of knowing what's coming settles heavily on his shoulders. Sarah, he starts, but she cuts him off gently. I know what you're thinking, Dad. You're wondering if I'm seeing threats where there aren't any. Hypervigilance. They warned us about it when we came home. She turns to face him fully, but this is different, this is real, and I've spent the last 3 months preparing just in case. Her father's expression shifts slightly. The renovations. To the outer buildings. The new security cameras disguised as wildlife monitors. The emergency preparedness drills with the staff. Sarah nods. And the tactical maps of the property I've been developing. Every approach route, every blind spot, every defensive position. I'm not just jumping at shadows, Dad. I'm making sure we're ready if shadows turn solid. Another motorcycle passes, then another, a deliberate show of presence. Through the window, they watch their ranch hands pause in their morning tasks, tension evident in their postures. They're trying to build fear, Sarah observes clinically. Standard intimidation tactics. They want us nervous, off balance, ready to accept their first offer just to avoid what comes after refusal. James stands, moving to join his daughter at the window. Together, they watch their peaceful valley, both recognizing the signs of approaching conflict with the practiced eye of combat veterans. What's your assessment? He asks, falling naturally into the familiar pattern of military briefing. They'll make initial contact soon, probably within the week. They'll try to appear professional, reasonable. They'll make an offer that looks generous on paper. Sarah's voice carries the quiet certainty of someone who's studied her enemy thoroughly. When we refuse, they'll escalate gradually, testing our resolve, looking for weaknesses. They expect to find a simple ranching operation, unprepared for serious resistance. A ghost of a smile crosses her face, though it carries no humor. They'll be disappointed. The morning progresses as ranch hands go about their duties, horses attended, and the peaceful rhythm of ranch life continues. But beneath this calm surface, Sarah Mitchell's mind works with military precision, mapping scenarios, calculating responses, preparing for the storm she knows is coming. Because some daughters don't just inherit their father's ranch, they inherit his warrior spirit and remember exactly how to use it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Part 3. First Contact. The Broken Sage Ranch's main office sits in a converted farmhouse that stood for 3 generations. Sarah reviews the morning's paperwork at her father's old desk, but her attention remains divided, tracking every vehicle that passes on the main road. Through the window, the late morning sun illuminates swirling dust kicked up by increasingly frequent motorcycle traffic. Lisa Whitehorse enters without knocking, her usually composed face carrying an edge of concern. "Sarah, we've got visitors. 3 bikes just turned onto our access road." Sarah nods slightly, having already noted the approaching engines. "Right on schedule," she murmurs, more to herself than Lisa. Her hand moves unconsciously to check. Her phone, fully charged, sheriff's number on speed dial, though she doubts she'll need it. "Want me to get your father?" Lisa asks, but Sarah's already standing, her movement carrying that fluid efficiency that seems out of place behind a ranch manager's desk. "No. Let him finish with the new fencing crew. I'll handle this." Her voice carries calm authority, though her mind is already shifting into tactical assessment mode. "Just make sure everyone stays clear of the main yard for now." Lisa hesitates at the door. "Are you sure? These guys, they don't look like the usual tourist types who sometimes wander in." "I'm sure." Sarah's smile carries genuine warmth for her friend's concern. "Trust me, Lisa, this isn't my first rodeo." As motorcycle engines grow louder, Sarah moves onto the front porch, positioning herself with careful casualness. Her stance appears relaxed, but it gives her clear sightlines to all approaches and multiple exit routes. She notes the riders' formation as they pull up. Triangular pattern, professional spacing, lead bike slightly forward. Military training just as she suspected. The bikes are custom choppers, expensive but modified for performance rather than just show. The riders wear leather cuts displaying the Steel Serpents insignia, a chrome serpent coiled around a lightning bolt. Sarah catalogues details automatically. Weapon prints under leather jackets, combat boots with distinctive wear patterns, the subtle comm devices in their helmets. The lead rider dismounts with fluid grace that speaks of extensive training. He removes his helmet, revealing a face that's handsome in a hard way, marked by a scar that runs from left temple to jaw. His eyes scan the property with professional assessment before settling on Sarah. "Miss Mitchell?" His voice carries practiced charm. "Name's Jack Viper Morrison. Hope you don't mind us dropping by unannounced." Sarah maintains her relaxed posture, though her senses remain razor-sharp. "We don't usually get many visitors out this way, Mr. Morrison, especially ones who've spent the last week running surveillance on our property." A flicker of surprise crosses his face, quickly masked. "Observant, and please call me Viper." "Everyone does. I prefer proper names," Sarah replies mildly, helps keep things professional. The other 2 riders have positioned themselves casually but strategically, one watching the approach road, one with clear view of the stables. Sarah notes their positions without seeming to look at them. "Professional is exactly what we're about," Morrison says, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "My associates and I represent a group of investors interested in properties with potential. Your ranch has caught our attention." Sarah allows herself a small smile. Interesting. Most investors don't need to case a property for a week before making contact, or run background checks on the owners, which I assume you've done. Another flash of surprise, more carefully hidden this time. Morrison studies her with increased interest. "You're well-informed, Miss Mitchell. Makes our job easier. We find it's best to be thorough in our research before making proposals." "And what proposal would that be, Mr. Morrison?" He reaches into his bike saddlebag, removing a leather portfolio. "We're prepared to offer significantly above market value for the Broken Sage Ranch. Cash deal, clean transaction, no complications." Sarah doesn't move to take the offered folder. "Our ranch isn't for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price," Morrison counters smoothly, "and our offer is very generous. Why don't you take a look, discuss it with your father?" "That won't be necessary." Sarah's voice remains pleasant, but carries a new edge of steel. "The Broken Sage isn't just property, Mr. Morrison. It's a legacy, a home, a commitment to this community. Some things can't be bought." Morrison's charm cools slightly. "Business is changing in this region, Miss Mitchell. Small, independent ranches are becoming difficult to maintain. We're offering a way to profit from inevitable change, rather than be damaged by it." "Is that what happened to the Carson place down in Rock Springs?" Sarah asks quietly. "They chose to be damaged rather than profit?" The temperature seems to drop several degrees. Morrison's stance shifts subtly, his right hand drifting closer to his jacket. Behind him, his companions tense slightly. "Accidents happen," he says softly, "especially in ranching. It's dangerous work." Sarah doesn't react to the implied threat, but her own stance changes microscopically, centering her weight in a way that would be significant only to someone with combat training. She notes with interest how Morrison picks up on the shift, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes, it is dangerous work," she agrees pleasantly, "which is why it's so important to be careful, to be prepared, to know exactly what and who you're dealing with." Their eyes lock, and for a moment the peaceful ranch scene falls away, replaced by something older, something that smells like cordite and tension. Morrison studies her with new attention, sensing something he can't quite identify. "Take the folder," he suggests, his voice carrying a harder edge now. "Review it carefully. We'll be back in 2 days for your answer." Sarah accepts the portfolio with her left hand, keeping her right, casual but ready. "2 days, then. You can find your way out. I'm sure you memorized our access roads during your surveillance." Morrison's smile returns, though it's colder now. "You're an interesting woman, Miss Mitchell. Not what I expected." "I get that a lot," she replies softly. The bikes roar to life, executing a perfect 3-point turn before heading back down the access road. Sarah watches them go, her mind already processing the encounter, analyzing details most would miss. Morrison's ranger's tattoo partially visible. Under his sleeve, the squad formation spacing of their bikes, the way they maintain tactical awareness even during a supposedly friendly business meeting. Lisa emerges from the office, her face tight with concern. "That didn't look friendly." "No," Sarah agrees, her eyes still tracking dust trails. "It wasn't meant to be friendly. It was meant to be a warning." Bzzz. She looks down at the portfolio in her hands, knowing it contains more than just a purchase offer. It's a declaration of intent, the opening move in a game where the stakes include everything her family has built. "They'll be back," Lisa says, quietly. Sarah nods, her expression carrying the calm certainty that comes from having faced bigger threats than motorcycle clubs. "Yes, they will. And when they do, they'll learn something important about the Broken Sage Ranch." "What's that?" Sarah's smile carries no warmth now. "That some daughters don't just inherit land, they inherit the will and the ability to defend it." By sunset, news of the Steel Serpents' visit has spread through Silver Creek like wildfire. Sarah sits in the Rusty Spur Diner, the town's unofficial command center for local gossip, observing the subtle changes in atmosphere. Every conversation carries undertones of worry. Every glance toward the door holds a new wariness. Emma Hayes, who's owned the diner for 20 years, brings Sarah's coffee without being asked. Her hands shake slightly as she sets down the cup. "Heard you had visitors today," she says quietly, glancing nervously at the window where two unfamiliar motorcycles idle past. "Word travels fast," Sarah replies, noting how the other patrons tense at the bike's sound. The fear is already taking root, exactly as the Serpents intended. "Tyler Carson was in earlier," Emma continues, her voice dropping lower. "Said his family didn't even get a chance to properly sell. One morning they just woke up to find their barn burned down, their horses scattered. Insurance called it an accident, but—" She trails off meaningfully. Sarah absorbs this information, adding it to her mental dossier on the Serpent's tactics. "How many other properties have they acquired around here?" 4 in the last month, all after similar accidents. Emma wrings her hands in her apron. "Sarah, honey, maybe you should consider their offer. Your daddy's not as young as he used to be, and running that big ranch alone." I'm not alone," Sarah corrects gently, "and we're not selling." The diner's door chimes as Sheriff Kate Harrison enters. She's young for her position, early 40s, but carries herself with the confidence of someone who's earned her badge rather than inherited it. Her eyes scan the room automatically before settling on Sarah. "Mind if I join you?" she asks, though she's already sliding into the booth. Like Sarah, she positions herself with clear views of both entrance and back door. "Heard you had company." "Today," Harrison begins, accepting coffee from Emma. "Jack Morrison and his friends making business proposals?" Sarah studies the sheriff carefully. "You know them?" "Know of them. Former military, like their leader. Army Rangers gone bad. Started small in Texas, built up operations through Montana, now pushing into Wyoming." Harrison's voice carries professional concern. "They're smart, organized, work just inside the law most times, making it hard to touch them, and when they do cross lines—" She shrugs meaningfully. "No witnesses, no evidence," Sarah finishes. "Just unfortunate accidents and coincidences." "Exactly." Harrison leans forward slightly. "Listen, Sarah, I know you and your father can handle yourselves, but these guys are different. They're not just thugs on bikes. They're trained, disciplined, and completely ruthless." Sarah's hand tightens fractionally around her coffee cup, the only outward sign of her response to the sheriff's words. "You sound like you're speaking from experience." Harrison's face darkens. "Lost 2 deputies in Montana last year, trying to investigate their operations. Official report says vehicle malfunction, brake failure on a mountain road. Unofficial story." She leaves the sentence hanging. The diner's atmosphere grows heavier as more bikes rumble past outside, their engines deliberately loud. Sarah notes how conversations pause, how people shrink into their seats, how fear spreads like ripples in still water. "They're marking territory," she observes quietly, "establishing presence, building pressure through visibility." Harrison raises an eyebrow. "That's an interesting analysis. Almost sounds military." Sarah meets her gaze steadily. "I read a lot." The sheriff studies her with new attention, perhaps noting the way Sarah maintains awareness of every entrance, how she tracks movement without seeming to look, how she carries herself with that distinctive precision that marks combat veterans. "Your father's service record is well known around here," Harrison says carefully, "but I don't recall hearing much about what you did before coming back to the ranch." "Not much to tell," Sarah replies mildly, though her eyes carry a different message. "Spent some time in the Marines, came home when Dad needed help with the ranch." Before Harrison can probe further, the diner's door chimes again. Marcus Chen enters, his face tight with concern. He spots Sarah and moves quickly to their booth. "Miss Mitchell," he says quietly, "we've got trouble at the ranch. Someone spooked the horses in the north pasture, cut a section of fence too, found fresh motorcycle tracks nearby." Sarah stands smoothly, leaving cash for her coffee. Anyone hurt? No, ma'am. Got the horses rounded up, but it's a message, Sarah finishes. First warning shot. She turns to Harrison. Sheriff, I trust you'll look into this. Harrison nods grimly. I'll send deputies out, but you won't find anything actionable, Sarah completes the thought. Just like all the other accidents. As she moves toward the door, her stance shifts subtly. The ranch manager's daughter seems to fade slightly, replaced by something else, something that makes even Harrison sit straighter. Sarah, the sheriff calls after her, be careful, don't do anything. Unfortunate. Sarah pauses at the door, her smile carrying no warmth now. Everything I do is carefully considered, Sheriff. It's how I was trained. Outside, the evening air carries the rumble of more motorcycles, their sound a deliberate reminder of changing times. Sarah walks to her truck, her movement carrying that liquid grace that speaks of years of combat training. The Steel Serpents have made their first move, testing defenses, probing for reactions. What they don't realize is that they're not just dealing with a rancher's daughter, they're dealing with someone who knows exactly how this game is played and has already prepared for every move they might make. Because some daughters don't just learn to ride horses, they learn to hunt wolves. Sarah reaches the ranch just as twilight paints the valley in shades of purple and gold. The north pasture fence has already been repaired. Her crew works efficiently in crisis, something she's quietly trained them for over the past year. James Mitchell stands by the repaired section, studying motorcycle tracks in the dusty earth. Professional work, he observes as Sarah approaches. They knew exactly where to cut to cause maximum disruption with minimum effort. Sarah kneels beside the tracks, her fingers tracing subtle patterns in the dirt. Two riders, modified street bikes with custom tires. They're not trying to hide their presence. They want us to know exactly who did this. The sound of an approaching vehicle makes both Mitchells turn, though neither appears startled. Dr. Cal Thompson's truck pulls up, and the veterinarian quickly joins them. Came as soon as I heard, he says, medical bag in hand. Any injuries? Horses are fine, Sarah assures him. They knew exactly how much pressure to apply, enough to spook them, but not enough to cause real damage. This wasn't about hurting livestock. It was about showing what they could do, her father finishes. First demonstration of power. Cal shifts uncomfortably. They did the same thing to the Carson place. Started small, escalated gradually. By the time they were done, he trails off, then adds quietly, I've got savings, Sarah, if you need help with security upgrades. No, Sarah cuts him off gently but firmly. What we need is for everyone to stay calm and go about their normal routines. The worst thing we can do is show them they've rattled us. She stands, brushing dust from her jeans with precise movements. But I appreciate the offer, Cal. It means a lot. As if on cue, 3 motorcycles roar past on the main road, their engines deliberately loud in the quiet evening. Sarah tracks them without seeming to move, noting speeds, directions, rider positions. They're going to come at us from all angles, she says quietly. Pressure on the ranch, pressure in town, pressure on anyone who works with us or supports us. Standard insurgency tactics, isolate the target, break down support networks, create an atmosphere of inevitable defeat. Her father watches her with knowing eyes. You've seen this pattern before. Different context, same playbook. Sarah's voice carries that professional detachment she developed during mission briefings. They expect us to follow the usual script, start nervous, grow desperate, eventually break under pressure. A ghost of a smile crosses her face, though it carries no warmth. They're going to be disappointed. Later, after Cal leaves and the evening crew takes over watch, Sarah leads her father into her office. The room appears ordinary at first glance, desk, computer, filing cabinets. But James notes how the windows offer clear views of all approaches. how the furniture is arranged to provide multiple exit routes. Sarah moves to a filing cabinet, opens a drawer, and pulls out a thick folder. Been preparing for something like this, she admits, spreading satellite photos and topographical maps across her desk. Every approach to the ranch, every blind spot, every defensive position, all mapped and analyzed. Her father studies the materials with professional appreciation. This is more than just ranch security. Yes. Sarah's fingers trace routes on the maps. They think they're dealing with simple ranches. They don't realize this entire valley is already set up as a tactical grid. Every fence line, every irrigation ditch, every piece of equipment, all positioned with purpose. A motorcycle's growl echoes off the valley walls. Sarah doesn't react, but her next words carry deadly certainty. They're playing a game they think they've mastered, but they're using an old playbook. I've got a newer one. Sarah, her father's voice carries concern now. These men are dangerous. So am I, she replies quietly. 6 years, Force Recon, specialized in counterinsurgency and tactical response. They're not the only ones with training. She turns to face her father fully. Remember what you taught me when I was little, about why we train horses with patience instead of force. James nods slowly. Because true strength isn't about domination. It's about understanding, preparation, and choosing the right moment to act. Exactly. Sarah's smile carries genuine warmth now. The Steel Serpents think they're the predators here. Think they're dealing with simple ranch folk who'll break under pressure. They don't realize they're walking into a trap 15 months in the making. Her father studies her face carefully. You knew something like this was coming. Saw the pattern developing in Montana, watched it spread south. Knew it was just a matter of time before they reached us. She gestures at the maps. So I prepared. Every renovation project, every new fence line, every security upgrade disguised as wildlife monitoring, all part of a larger plan. Outside, more motorcycles pass, their engines a constant reminder of changing times. But in Sarah's office, father and daughter exchange looks that speak of battles fought and lessons learned. They'll be back tomorrow, Sarah continues. Morrison will want to follow up, show increased pressure after today's warning shot. He'll expect to find us nervous, off balance, ready to consider his offer more seriously. And what will he find instead? Sarah's expression shifts slightly, and for a moment James sees not his daughter, but the warrior she became, the tactician who earned commendations her civilian neighbors know nothing about. He'll find exactly what I want him to find, she replies softly. A simple ranch operation, apparently vulnerable but not yet broken, and when he pushes harder, thinking he's found an easy target. She lets the sentence hang, but her father understands. Some daughters don't just inherit land, they inherit the warrior spirit that knows victory often comes not through direct confrontation, but through letting your enemy believe they're winning right up until the moment they realize they've already lost. Morning brings a heavy fog to Silver Creek Valley, unusual for this time of year. Sarah stands at the ranch's main gate, watching ghostly tendrils curl around fence posts and equipment. The limited visibility would make most people nervous, especially after yesterday's events, but her expression shows only calm assessment. Marcus approaches through the mist, his boots crunching softly on gravel. Feed supplier called, he reports, his voice tight with concern. Said they can't make today's delivery, something about truck maintenance issues. Convenient timing, Sarah remarks mildly, though her mind is already calculating alternate supply routes. Let me guess, they were apologetic, but suggested we might want to consider other arrangements for the future. Marcus nods grimly, said they've been having lots of mechanical problems lately. Mentioned the Steel Serpents have their own supply network, supposedly very reliable. Sarah allows herself a small smile. They work fast, not just targeting us directly, but starting to squeeze support infrastructure. Classic pressure tactics. Before Marcus can respond, Lisa's truck comes racing up the access road, dust trailing behind it despite the damp morning. She barely waits for the vehicle to stop before jumping out, her face flushed with anger. "They hit my place last night," she announces, hands shaking slightly. "Nothing major, just broke some windows, left their gang symbols painted on my barn. Sheriff's deputies said there's no proof who did it, but the message is clear." Sarah finishes. "They're targeting our people now, showing that supporting us has consequences." She studies Lisa carefully, noting the fear behind the anger. "Go home, Lisa. Take a few days off. Let things cool down. No one will think less of you." "Like hell I will," Lisa responds fiercely. "My grandfather worked this ranch with your grandfather. White horse women don't scare easy." Sarah's expression softens slightly. "No, they don't. But I need you thinking clearly, not reacting emotionally. That's how mistakes happen." The rumble of approaching motorcycles cuts through the fog. Sarah counts engines by sound. 5. Bikes, moving in formation. Through the mist, chrome glints as the Steel Serpents materialize like apparitions, Jack Morrison in the lead. Inside, Sarah orders quietly, "Both of you, remember what we discussed about non-engagement protocols." Marcus hesitates. "Miss Mitchell." "Inside," she repeats, her voice carrying that tone of command that brooks no argument. "Trust me." As her people retreat, Sarah maintains her position at the gate, stance relaxed but balanced. Morrison pulls up first, his followers arranging themselves in a loose semicircle behind him. "Miss Mitchell," he greets, removing his helmet. "Quite the dramatic morning for a chat." "Nature's funny that way," Sarah replies evenly, never knows quite what mood to wear. Morrison's eyes flick to the broken windows of Lisa's truck, then back to Sarah. "Heard you had some trouble last night. Shame how vandals target isolated properties. Makes it hard to maintain good help." Interesting perspective. Sarah's voice remains pleasant, though her eyes have gone cold. "I've found loyalty matters more than isolation. Good people stick together through troubled times." "Loyalty's admirable," Morrison agrees, his smile not reaching his eyes. "But it can get expensive. Feed costs rising, supply lines getting unreliable, insurance rates going up due to increased risk factors." He spreads his hands in a gesture of mock helplessness. "Modern ranching's a tough business." "So I've heard." Sarah matches his fake smile. "Fortunately, we're pretty self-sufficient here. Generation of experience teaches you how to weather all kinds of storms." Morrison's expression hardens slightly. "Some storms are harder to weather than others, Miss Mitchell. Smart folks know when to seek shelter." "And where would you suggest we seek this shelter, Mr. Morrison? Under your organization's protection? For a reasonable fee, of course." "Our offer's still open," he replies smoothly. "Though given recent developments, we might need to adjust the terms." "Market fluctuations, you understand." Sarah studies him with the same careful attention she once used to evaluate hostile terrain. Interesting negotiating strategy. Create problems, then offer to solve them for a price. "Something dangerous," flashes in Morrison's eyes. "Careful, Miss Mitchell. Wouldn't want anyone getting the wrong idea about our business practices. Misunderstandings can have unfortunate consequences." Yes." Sarah agrees softly, her stance shifting microscopically. "They certainly can." The fog swirls between them, thick with unspoken threats and measured responses. Morrison's men shift on their bikes, hands drifting casually toward concealed weapons. Sarah appears not to notice, though her awareness tracks every movement. "Take the day to reconsider our offer," Morrison suggests, his voice carrying that edge of steel beneath the charm. "Think about your employees, your father, your..." Community. Lot of people could get hurt in a prolonged disagreement. Sarah meets his gaze steadily. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Morrison, but perhaps you should take the day to reconsider your approach. Some targets aren't what they appear to be. Some fights aren't worth the cost of winning. Morrison's laugh carries no humor. Is that a threat, Miss Mitchell? Information, she corrects gently, since we're sharing business advice. Audrey, as the bikes roar away into the fog, Sarah remains at the gate, her mind already processing the encounter, analyzing every word, every gesture, every implied threat. The Steel Serpents are escalating exactly as expected, following a playbook. She's seen before in different theaters of conflict. What they don't realize is that they're not just facing a rancher's daughter. They're facing someone who's written her own playbook, one that turns their standard tactics into predictable moves, in a game they don't even know they're playing. Because some daughters don't just learn to protect the ranch, they learn to turn every threat into an opportunity, every pressure point into a pivot, every enemy's strength into their ultimate weakness. Part 7. Hidden Preparations. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds gather over Silver Creek Valley, promising the kind of storm that makes even seasoned ranchers take notice. Sarah stands in what appears to be a simple storage barn, though few would recognize the sophisticated command center hidden within its weathered walls. They hit the Thompson place last night, Lisa reports, pointing to a detailed map spread across a repurposed workbench. Third property this week, same pattern. Property damage, threatening messages, just enough violence to send a clear message, without crossing legal lines. Sarah nods, marking the location with a red pin. The map is covered with similar markers, each representing Steel Serpent activities over the past 3 months. The pattern is clear to her trained eye, a systematic campaign of intimidation spreading across the valley like a carefully controlled wildfire. They're establishing a perimeter, she observes, fingers tracing invisible lines between incidents, isolating key properties, cutting supply lines, identifying pressure points, classic encirclement tactics. Marcus enters, shaking rain from his jacket. Feed supplier called again, says they might be able to make partial deliveries at triple the usual rate. Mentioned the Steel Serpents could guarantee regular supply at competitive prices. Of course they did. Sarah's voice carries no surprise. They're not just targeting ranches, they're building infrastructure, creating dependency, making themselves necessary for survival. Thunder rolls across the valley as Sarah moves to a locked cabinet, opening it to reveal multiple screens showing security feeds from across the property. Each camera is carefully disguised as ordinary ranch. Equipment, weather monitors, wildlife cameras, motion-activated lights. What they don't realize, she continues, typing commands into a concealed keyboard, is that we've been preparing for this kind of situation for over a year. The screens shift, showing cached footage of Steel Serpent activities. Surveillance. Runs, intimidation visits, strategic positioning of assets. Every movement catalogued, every pattern analyzed. Those wildlife cameras you had us install last spring, Lisa realizes. They weren't just for monitoring predators, were they? Sarah's smile carries a predatory edge. Different kind of predator, same principle. Every renovation project, every equipment upgrade, every new security measure, all designed to look like normal ranch improvements while serving multiple purposes. She presses another button, and a hidden panel slides open in the wall, revealing a comprehensive communications setup. We're not as isolated as they think. Got backup power, satellite communications, emergency supplies cached at strategic points across the property. Marcus whistles softly. You've been expecting something like this. Planning for it, Sarah corrects. Force Recon taught me the importance of preparation, of having contingencies for every scenario. The Steel Serpents think they're dealing with simple ranchers. They don't realize they're facing someone who's written the book on counterinsurgency, operations. Lightning flashes outside as Sarah moves to another section of the barn, revealing what appears to be ordinary tack storage. With practiced efficiency, she manipulates hidden catches, and panels slide aside to show tactical equipment carefully organized and maintained. When I came back from my last deployment, she explains, checking seals on waterproof cases, I knew civilian life would be different. But some skills, some ways of thinking, they stay with you. So I started preparing, building infrastructure, training our people, all under the guise of normal ranch operations. Lisa studies the hidden arsenal with wide eyes. Does your father know about all this? He helped design most of it, Sarah replies. Vietnam taught him lessons about preparation that translated well to ranch security. We've just updated the methodology. Another thunderclap shakes the barn as Sarah activates a holographic display showing topographical overlays of the entire valley. Red markers indicate known Steel Serpent positions. Blue markers show ranch assets and defensive positions. They think they're running a sophisticated operation, she observes, studying the tactical display. But they're following old patterns, predictable strategies. They haven't realized that while they're playing checkers, we've been setting up a chessboard. The barn door opens, admitting James Mitchell along with Sheriff Harrison. The sheriff's eyes widen slightly at the sophisticated setup, but she quickly masks her surprise. Impressive operation you've got here, Harrison comments carefully. Bit more extensive than standard ranch security. These aren't standard times, Sarah responds, not looking up from the tactical display. The Steel Serpents hit 3 more properties last night. Patterns suggest they're establishing a control grid across the valley. Harrison nods grimly. Got reports this morning. Can't prove anything, of course. They're too smart to leave evidence. They don't need to leave evidence, Sarah replies. Fear works better than proof. Every unsolved incident, every accident, every mysterious problem, it all builds a narrative of inevitable victory, makes resistance seem futile. Lightning illuminates the barn's interior as Sarah zooms in on specific sections of the map. But they've made one critical mistake. What's that? Harrison asks. Sarah's expression shifts slightly, and for a moment they all see past the rancher's daughter to the Force Recon veteran beneath. They think they're the only ones who know how to wage this kind of war. They haven't realized they're fighting someone who's made a career of turning insurgent tactics back against their users. Thunder rolls again as Sarah outlines her observations, marking patterns and vulnerabilities with military precision. The Steel Serpents are about to learn a harsh lesson about assumptions and appearances. Because some daughters don't just learn to manage a ranch, they learn to turn their entire world into a carefully prepared battlefield, where every fence line is a firing position, every pasture a kill zone, and every seemingly vulnerable point is actually a carefully night settles over Silver Creek Valley like a tactical shroud, the storm's aftermath leaving the air thick with anticipation. Sarah stands at her office window, watching lightning flicker on the distant horizon while monitoring movement along the ranch's perimeter through carefully concealed sensors. Just got word from town, Marcus reports, entering with the quiet efficiency she's drilled into all her staff. The Steel Serpents have taken over the old Miller warehouse, turned it into some kind of command center. Sarah nods, having already noted increased motorcycle traffic in that direction. How many? At least 30 bikes, maybe more coming. Word is they're calling in reinforcements from other chapters. Expected, Sarah replies calmly. They're preparing for a show of force, standard escalation after initial pressure tactics. Fail. She turns from the window, her movement carrying that liquid grace that speaks of combat training. Time to implement Phase 1. Marcus shifts nervously. You sure about this? Once we start... They started this, Sarah corrects gently. We're just changing the rules of engagement. She moves to her desk, activating a secure tablet. Get everyone in position. Remember, no direct confrontation, no traceable actions. Everything has to look like unfortunate coincidence. As Marcus leaves, Sarah's father enters, his face tight with concern. Scout team reports increased activity on the North Ridge. They're setting up observation posts. Good. Sarah's smile carries no warmth. Let them watch. Let them think. They're gathering intelligence. She brings up a tactical display showing hidden defensive positions across the property. Meanwhile, our people are already in place. The storm gave perfect cover for final preparations. James studies his daughter carefully. You're enjoying this. Not enjoying, Sarah corrects, checking encrypted communications. Just remembering. Some skills you never really forget. They just wait for the right moment to become useful again. A motorcycle's growl echoes through the night, then another. Sarah tracks them without seeming to move, noting positions, patterns, probable assignments. They're running regular patrols now, trying to establish dominance through visibility. Like wolves marking territory, James observes. Wolves are smarter, Sarah replies softly. They check for traps before claiming new hunting grounds. Her phone vibrates, a signal from one of her teams. Time to remind the Steel Serpents why some territories aren't worth claiming. She keys her radio, voice shifting into command. Mode. All units implement Phase 1. I say again, Phase 1 is a go. Across Silver Creek Valley, carefully prepared plans spring into action. At the Miller warehouse, the Steel Serpent's new command center suddenly loses power, not through obvious sabotage, but through seemingly natural equipment failures that any investigator would attribute to the recent storm. Their backup generators should be failing right about now, Sarah murmurs, watching sensor feeds. As if on cue, secondary power systems sputter and die, victims of contaminated fuel that would appear to be simple, poor maintenance. In town, traffic cameras mysteriously malfunction, their data corrupted by what technicians will later blame on lightning strikes. The Steel Serpent surveillance network goes dark, leaving them effectively blind in unfamiliar territory. Phase 1 completion confirmed, Lisa reports via secure channel. All targets affected, no traceable connections. Sarah allows herself a small smile. Now we wait. Let them feel the frustration of fighting shadows. Through the night, more accidents plague the Steel Serpent's operations. Communications experience inexplicable interference. Vehicles develop mysterious mechanical problems. Supply lines suffer unexpected disruptions. Each incident appears isolated, random, yet all serve to systematically dismantle the gang's support infrastructure. They're scrambling, Marcus observes, watching motorcycle groups rush to deal with each new crisis, looking for patterns, trying to understand what's happening. That's their mistake, Sarah replies, monitoring reaction times and response patterns. They're looking for direct opposition, for someone to fight. They don't understand that sometimes the most effective resistance never shows its face. Dawn approaches as Sarah reviews Phase 1 results with her core team. The Steel Serpents. Carefully planned operation has been disrupted not through violence or direct confrontation, but through the systematic exploitation of vulnerabilities they never knew existed. They'll adapt, James warns, studying the tactical display. Men like Morrison don't accept defeat easily. They'll try, Sarah agrees, but every response, every adjustment, every new strategy, it all follows patterns. Patterns we've studied, prepared for, turned into traps. Her eyes track movement on the perimeter sensors. They think they're dealing with simple ranchers trying to protect their land. They haven't realized they're facing someone who's made a career of turning enemy tactics against themselves. Lisa enters with fresh intelligence. Morrison's called an emergency meeting. Our sources say he's furious, demanding explanations for the equipment failures. Of course he is, Sarah nods. Men like him only understand direct power. They can't comprehend being defeated by accidents and coincidences. She studies the tactical display, watching the Steel Serpents concentrate their forces, unconsciously, making themselves more vulnerable to Phase 2, because some daughters don't just learn to defend, they learn to attack in ways their enemies never see coming. While the Steel Serpents search for opponents to fight, they don't realize they're already losing a war they don't even know they're in, against an enemy who learned long ago that the most effective victories are often won without ever appearing. To fight at all, the morning sun rises over Silver Creek Valley, illuminating a battlefield where one side doesn't even realize the true nature of the conflict. And in her command center, Sarah Mitchell prepares for Phase 2, knowing that sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to let them defeat themselves through their own assumptions and expectations. The morning brings no relief for the Steel Serpents. Sarah watches through hidden cameras as Morrison paces the parking lot of the Miller warehouse, barking orders into a satellite phone that keeps dropping signals at crucial moments. His men scramble to address a cascade of equipment failures and logistics problems that seem to multiply with every attempted solution. Their fuel supply's been compromised, Marcus reports, reviewing intelligence feeds. Half their bikes won't start, and the ones that do are running rough. Mechanics can't figure out why. Sarah allows herself a small smile, remembering the specialized additives her teams introduced to the gang's fuel supplies during the storm. Compounds that would gradually degrade performance without leaving traceable evidence. They're calling in technical support from other chapters, Lisa adds, monitoring encrypted communications. But their secure channels keep experiencing interference, something about atmospheric conditions affecting their frequencies. Atmospheric conditions, Sarah repeats softly, glancing at the sophisticated signal disruption equipment hidden in what appears to be ordinary ranch machinery. Nature can be so unpredictable. The ranch's main gate sensors alert to approaching vehicles. 3 SUVs moving in convoy formation. Sarah identifies them by engine sound before they appear. Sheriff Harrison's department vehicles. Right on schedule, she murmurs. Morrison's frustration is making him careless. Time to add some official pressure to his problems. Through surveillance feeds, Sarah watches the confrontation unfold. Harrison emerges from her lead vehicle, backed by 6 deputies. Her stance is professional but carries clear authority as she approaches Morrison. Got some questions about recent equipment failures in the area. Harrison's voice comes clearly through directional microphones Sarah's teams planted days ago. Interesting pattern developing. Seems to be affecting specific properties and businesses. Morrison's response is lost in convenient static, but his body language speaks volumes: tension, contained anger, the frustration of a man used to being in control, finding himself increasingly powerless. They're losing their grip, James observes, joining Sarah at the monitors. But that makes them dangerous. Cornered predators fight hardest. Sarah nods, already noting increased movement among the Steel Serpents' remaining operational units. They'll try to reassert control through direct action, probably target someone they think is vulnerable. Make an example. As if summoning her words into reality, Lisa bursts in with fresh intelligence. Just intercepted their communications. They're planning to hit the Thompson place tonight. Going to burn their barn, send a message about consequences of resistance. Perfect! Sarah's smile carries predatory satisfaction. They're following the playbook exactly as expected. When pressure tactics fail, escalate to visible violence, create fear through example. She moves to the tactical display, adjusting positions of hidden assets. Alert Team 2, I want surveillance in place before they move, and make sure the Thompson's security systems are fully operational. Already done, Marcus confirms. Hidden cameras, motion sensors, everything we installed last month under the guise of modernizing their operation. Plus, our people are in position to observe. Sarah studies the tactical overlay, watching motorcycle groups consolidate around the Miller warehouse. The Steel Serpents are gathering strength, planning to demonstrate their power through decisive action. They don't realize they're being herded into precisely the response she's prepared for. Should we warn the Thompsons? Lisa asks, concern evident in her voice. They're already safe, Sarah assures her. Moved them out last night, made it look like a regular visit to relatives. Their place is empty, except for our surprises. As evening approaches, Sarah gathers her core team for final briefing. The Steel Serpents' planned raid presents a perfect opportunity, but timing will be crucial. Remember, she instructs, no direct confrontation. We're not trying to stop them. We're documenting, gathering evidence, adding to the pattern we're building. Let them think they're demonstrating strength. They won't realize until too late that they're actually documenting their own crimes. Through sophisticated surveillance equipment, they watch the Steel Serpents prepare for their night operation. Morrison assigns teams, reviews plans, coordinates movements, all while being recorded by cameras he doesn't know exist. He's still thinking like a military commander, Sarah observes, noting formation patterns and tactical approaches, using old training, old methods. Hasn't realized he's fighting a different kind of war now. As darkness falls, the Steel Serpents move out, their remaining operational bikes roaring through the valley with deliberate menace. Sarah tracks their progress through multiple sensor feeds, coordinating her hidden teams to maintain optimal surveillance positions. All units in place, Marcus confirms. Every approach covered, every angle recorded. Whatever happens tonight, we'll have it documented. Sarah nods, her expression carrying that focused intensity she developed during combat operations. Let them think they're proving their power. Let them believe they're teaching the valley a lesson about resistance. Because some daughters don't just learn to protect what's theirs. They learn to turn every enemy action into evidence, every show of force into self-incrimination, every attempted demonstration of power into proof of their own vulnerability. The night deepens over Silver Creek Valley as the Steel Serpents move toward their target, unaware that their planned show of strength is about to become something very different. They think they're writing a story about power and intimidation. They don't realize they're actually creating evidence for their own downfall, documented in high definition by an opponent who learned long ago that the most effective victories often come not through direct confrontation, but through letting your enemy defeat themselves while providing proof of their own destruction. Night wraps around the Thompson farm like a tactical cloak as Sarah monitors multiple surveillance feeds from her mobile command position. The Steel Serpents approach in formation, their remaining operational bikes moving with military precision, toward what they believe is an empty target, ripe for demonstration. 3 groups converging, Marcus reports through encrypted comm. Main force from the east, 2 smaller units flanking north and south, just like you predicted. They're still thinking conventionally, Sarah observes, watching thermal imaging, tracks of the approaching forces, using standard tactical approaches, establishing clear fields of fire. They haven't realized conventional tactics make them predictable. Through high-resolution cameras disguised as ordinary security lights, she watches Morrison coordinate his teams with hand signals. His movements are professional, disciplined, exactly what you'd expect from former military, and exactly what makes him vulnerable to someone who's studied such procedures from both sides. All recording systems active, Lisa confirms from her position in the main command center. Every angle covered, every movement documented. Whatever happens tonight, we'll have it in full HD. Sarah allows herself a small smile as she watches the Steel Serpents split into assault teams. They're following standard breach and clear protocols, establishing perimeter security, maintaining communications discipline. Everything by the book. A book she knows by heart. They're approaching the first trigger point, she notes quietly. Everyone maintain position, let them walk right into it. The lead team reaches the Thompson's main gate, cutting the chain with professional efficiency. They don't notice the subtle pressure plate hidden beneath ordinary gravel, or the sophisticated sensors tracking their every move. Primary surveillance activated, Marcus reports, getting clear facial recognition on all subjects. Morrison signals his teams forward, moving toward the barn with practiced caution. Sarah watches them approach the structure that appears vulnerable but has been carefully prepared for this exact scenario. They're carrying incendiary devices, Lisa notes through the thermal imaging, planning to make it look like an electrical fire. Just like the Carson place, Sarah confirms. They're repeating known patterns, establishing consistent methodology, perfect for building a legal case. The first team breaches the barn door, moving inside with tactical precision. Sarah's hidden cameras capture every movement, every action, every face. Through multiple feeds, she watches them begin placing their devices, setting up what they believe will be another unfortunate accident. All units hold position, she commands softly. Let them complete their setup. We need the whole sequence. Documented. Morrison supervises from just outside, maintaining security while his men work. Even in the dark, Sarah can read the satisfaction in his posture. He thinks he's orchestrating another successful demonstration of power. They're starting. The timers, Marcus reports, getting ready to pull back. Perfect, Sarah murmurs. Initiate phase 2. Across the Thompson property, carefully prepared systems activate in sequence. First, powerful floods suddenly illuminate the entire area, catching the Steel Serpents in harsh light from multiple angles. Before they can react, hidden speakers activate, broadcasting a clear warning. This is the Silver Creek Sheriff's Department. You are under surveillance and surrounded. Stand down immediately. It's a recording, but in the confusion, the Steel Serpents react exactly as expected, breaking formation, rushing for their bikes. Their disciplined organization dissolves into chaos as hidden cameras capture every moment of their panic. Look at that, Sarah observes with professional appreciation. All that military training, and they still break pattern under unexpected pressure, falling right into documented flight behavior. Through multiple feeds, she watches the Steel Serpents scatter, their retreat captured from every angle. Their hasty departure leaves behind clear evidence, dropped equipment, distinct boot prints, and most importantly, their unexploded incendiary devices. Sheriff Harrison's actual units are 3 minutes out, Lisa reports. They'll find an intact crime scene with multiple perpetrators clearly identified on video. Send the footage to all secured channels, Sarah directs. I want every law enforcement agency in 3 states to have copies before morning. Let's see Morrison explain this one away. As red and blue lights appear on the horizon, Sarah begins coordinating the next phase. The Thompson incident isn't just about preventing property damage. It's about establishing patterns, building evidence, and forcing the Steel Serpents to reveal their true nature on camera. Because some daughters don't just learn to protect property, they learn to turn every enemy action into self-incrimination, every attempted show of force into documented evidence of criminal intent. While Morrison and his men flee into the night, they don't realize they've just starred in the first episode of their own downfall, directed by someone who learned in Force Recon that the best victories often come not from winning fights, but from making your enemy defeat themselves while providing proof of their own destruction. The night winds down as sheriff's deputies process the scene, collecting evidence that will support surveillance footage showing clear criminal intent. And somewhere in the darkness, Sarah Mitchell already prepares for the next phase, knowing that cornered predators are most dangerous when they realize they're no longer the hunters. Dawn breaks over Silver Creek Valley, revealing the aftermath of the Thompson Farm operation. Sarah stands in her command center, reviewing surveillance footage with Sheriff Harrison, while tactical feeds show the Steel Serpents in disarray, their forces scattered and confused after last night's debacle. "This is impressive work," Harrison admits, studying the high-resolution images, clearly showing Morrison directing the attempted arson. Multiple angles, clear facial recognition, perfect audio. Almost like the whole thing was choreographed. Sometimes the best evidence comes from letting criminals follow their own playbook, Sarah replies mildly. They're predictable when they think they're in control. The command center's alert system suddenly pings. Multiple motorcycle groups converging on the Miller warehouse. Sarah switches feeds, watching the Steel Serpents gather for what's clearly an emergency meeting. They're calling in reinforcements, Marcus reports, entering with fresh intelligence. Spotted 3 truck convoys coming in from the north. Looks like heavy equipment, probably military surplus. Morrison's not playing around anymore. Sarah nods, having anticipated this response. Wounded pride makes men predictable. He can't accept being outmaneuvered, so he'll escalate to overwhelming force. Standard response when subtle tactics fail. Through surveillance feeds, they watch. More bikes arrive at the warehouse, their riders carrying the kind of hardware that speaks of serious intent. Harrison shifts uncomfortably at the display of force. "This is more than just gang activity," the sheriff observes. "These guys are gearing up for war." "No," Sarah corrects quietly, her eyes tracking movement patterns. "They're gearing up for a mistake. Men like Morrison, when pushed, always revert to what they know. Direct confrontation, visible power, shock and awe tactics. They forget that sometimes the biggest targets are the easiest to hit." Her phone vibrates, a signal from one of her observation teams. They're moving equipment into position around the valley, setting up for a show of force. Harrison studies the tactical display with growing concern. "I should call in state support, get ahead of this before it explodes." "Not yet," Sarah advises, her voice carrying that quiet authority that makes even the sheriff pause. "Let them commit fully to their course of action. Let them cross lines that can't be uncrossed." As if summoning her words into reality, new intel arrives from Lisa's surveillance team. Morrison's addressing his people now, telling them it's time to take off the gloves. They're planning something big. Sarah moves to the main tactical display, watching red dots multiply across the valley map as more Steel Serpents arrive. To most observers, it would look like an overwhelming force gathering. To her trained eye, it looks like a target-rich environment. "They'll come at us directly now," she predicts, noting deployment patterns. "No more subtle pressure tactics. They'll want to make an example, show everyone what happens to those who resist." "And you're just going to let them try?" Harrison asks incredulously. Sarah's smile carries no warmth. "Sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to let them think they're winning right up until the moment they realize they've already lost." Midun, through sophisticated surveillance systems, they watch the Steel Serpents prepare for what they believe will be a decisive show of force. Morrison coordinates with his lieutenants, positioning assets, establishing command and control networks, all while being recorded by cameras he doesn't know exist. "Look at their deployment," Sarah observes, noting patterns in their positioning. Standard military doctrine, clear fields of fire, overlapping coverage, textbook force projection. They haven't realized that following the textbook makes them predictable. Marcus enters with fresh intelligence from town. They're starting to move against local businesses again. 3 shops got visited this morning. Direct threats this time, no more subtle pressure. Of course, Sarah nods. They need to reassert. Control quickly now. Show they haven't been weakened. Pride makes them aggressive. Aggression makes them sloppy. Through multiple feeds, they watch the Steel Serpents expand their presence across the valley, trying to demonstrate power through visibility and intimidation. What they don't realize is that every move, every threat, every display of force is being documented, building a case that will eventually prove their undoing. Because some daughters don't just learn to defend what's theirs, they learn to turn enemy strength into weakness, to use an opponent's own force against them, to let their adversaries build the evidence of their own destruction while thinking they're demonstrating their power. The morning progresses as Sarah coordinates her response teams, positioning assets and preparing for what comes next. The Steel Serpents think they're preparing for a show of force. They don't realize they're actually setting up their own downfall, orchestrated by someone who learned in Force Recon that the most decisive victories often come not from matching force with force, but from letting your enemy defeat themselves through their own aggression and pride. By mid-afternoon, the Steel Serpents' show of force transforms Silver Creek Valley into what looks like a war zone. Armored vehicles rumble down quiet country roads, bikes patrol in military formation, and the Miller warehouse has become a fortified command center bristling with communications equipment and armed guards. Sarah watches it all through her surveillance network, noting each position, each patrol route, each tactical deployment. Morrison has called in every favor, mobilized every asset, determined to crush any resistance with overwhelming force. Latest count puts them at over 50 bikes, Marcus reports, updating the tactical display. Plus those 3 armored trucks they brought in. Word in town is they're planning something big for tonight. They feel embarrassed, Sarah observes, studying patrol patterns. Last night's failure damaged their reputation. Now they need to reassert dominance, make an example that no one will forget. Through high-resolution cameras, she watches Morrison coordinate with his lieutenants outside the warehouse. His movements carry the sharp edge of wounded pride, of a man used to control finding himself outmaneuvered. They're moving against multiple targets, Lisa reports through secure comm. Just got word they're planning simultaneous attacks on supporter properties. Want to show they can hit anywhere, anytime. Sarah nods, having anticipated this escalation. Classic shock or tactics. Hit hard, hit everywhere, overwhelm any possible response. Her smile carries predatory satisfaction. They're playing right into our hands. James Mitchell enters the command center, his face tight with concern. Got calls from several ranch hands. Steel Serpents approached them directly, made it clear. Supporting us would have permanent consequences. Expected, Sarah replies, her voice carrying that quiet certainty that comes from having seen this pattern before. They're trying to isolate us, break our support network, standard insurgency tactics, separate the target from its base of support. Through surveillance feeds, they watch more bikes arrive, their riders carrying military-grade hardware that speaks of serious intent. The Steel Serpents are done with subtle pressure. Now they're preparing for open warfare. We should evacuate non-essential personnel, James suggests, watching the display with professional concern. Get people clear before whatever their planning starts. Already done, Sarah confirms. Been moving people out quietly for the last 24 hours, making it look like normal travel patterns, nothing to alert their surveillance. The command center's alert system suddenly pings, multiple vehicles approaching from different directions. Sarah switches feeds, watching trucks loaded with construction equipment move into position around the valley. They're setting up roadblocks, Marcus observes, controlling access points, establishing a perimeter. More than that, Sarah corrects, noting placement patterns. They're creating kill zones, channeling movement along predictable routes. Standard military doctrine for area, denial and control. Through sophisticated monitoring systems, they watch the Steel Serpents transform Silver Creek Valley into what they believe will be their perfect battlefield. Morrison coordinates deployments with professional precision, establishing clear fields of fire, overlapping coverage, textbook force projection. They're preparing for war, Lisa says quietly, watching the tactical display fill with red markers indicating enemy positions. No, Sarah replies, her voice carrying that deadly calm she developed in Force Recon. They're preparing to learn why some daughters don't just inherit land, they inherit the knowledge of how to defend it. Her phone vibrates, signals from multiple observation teams reporting increased activity around the valley. The Steel Serpents are moving with purpose now, implementing what they believe is a foolproof plan to demonstrate their power. They'll strike at sunset, Sarah predicts, studying movement patterns, multiple simultaneous attacks, overwhelming force, shock and awe. They want to break any possibility of resistance in one decisive action. Through surveillance feeds, they watch Morrison inspect his forces, checking weapons, reviewing plans, ensuring every detail is perfect. He believes he's preparing for a demonstration of unstoppable power. What he doesn't realize is that every position he takes, every asset he deploys, every tactical advantage he thinks he's establishing is actually part of a larger plan. 1. Written by someone who learned in Force Recon that the most effective traps are the ones your enemy walks into willingly, believing they're the ones in control. The afternoon wanes as Sarah coordinates her hidden assets, positioning teams and preparing countermeasures. The Steel Serpents think they're setting up for a display of overwhelming force. They haven't realized they're actually arranging themselves perfectly for their own defeat, orchestrated by someone who understands that true victory often comes not from matching force with force, but from turning an enemy's strength into the instrument of their own destruction. Because some daughters don't just learn to protect the ranch, they learn to turn every enemy advantage into a weakness, every show of force into an opportunity, every attempted demonstration of power into proof of their own vulnerability. The sun hangs low over Silver Creek Valley, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold as Sarah completes her final preparations. From her command center, she watches the Steel Serpents marshal their forces through multiple surveillance feeds, each screen showing another piece of Morrison's elaborate plan taking shape. Latest intel confirms simultaneous strikes planned for full dark, Marcus reports, updating the tactical display. 3 main target groups: the ranch itself, supporter properties in town, and what they think are our supply lines. Coordinated. Attacks, Sarah nods, studying the enemy positions marked in red across her tactical map. They want to cut off all support, isolate us completely, then move in for what they think will be the killing blow. Through high-resolution cameras, she watches Morrison brief his team leaders outside the warehouse command center. His movements carry military precision, but also the subtle signs of stress she's learned to recognize. The slightly too sharp gestures, the tension in his stance that speaks of a man trying to maintain control through sheer force of will. "We've got movement on the North Ridge," Lisa's voice comes through secure comm. "They're positioning heavy weapons. Looks like they're setting up for a show of force." James Mitchell studies the tactical display with growing concern. Those positions give them coverage of every approach to the ranch. They could effectively seal us off from any outside help. "That's exactly what they want us to think," Sarah replies, her voice carrying that quiet certainty that makes even veteran warriors pause. They're following standard military doctrine: establish fire superiority, control movement corridors, dominate high ground. All textbook moves. "And that makes them predictable," James finishes, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Exactly." But Sarah's smile carries no warmth as she watches more Steel Serpents move into position. They think they're setting up a perfect tactical grid. They haven't realized they're actually positioning themselves exactly where we want them. Through sophisticated surveillance systems, they track the Steel Serpents' preparations. Morrison has called in every available resource, determined to crush any resistance with overwhelming force. Bikes patrol in military formation, armored vehicles take up strategic positions, and teams of armed men establish what they believe are unassailable defensive positions. Final count puts their force at nearly 70 bikes, Marcus updates, marking positions on the display. Plus the armored vehicles, heavy weapons teams and support elements. They're not leaving anything to chance this time. Pride makes men predictable, Sarah observes, watching Morrison coordinate his forces with professional efficiency. They're so focused on showing their strength that they can't see how it makes them vulnerable. The command center's alert. System pings, new movement detected on multiple approaches. Sarah switches feeds, watching the Steel Serpents begin their final preparations for what they believe will be a decisive demonstration of power. They're starting to move support teams into position, Lisa reports. Communications gear, medical, supplies, fuel trucks, everything they'd need for sustained operations. Of course, Sarah nods. They're preparing for a siege, thinking they can wear us down through sustained pressure. Her expression shifts slightly, showing a glimpse of the warrior beneath the rancher's daughter. They haven't realized that sometimes the best way to break a siege is to let the attackers trap themselves. Through multiple feeds, they watch. The Steel Serpents transform the valley into what they believe will be their perfect battlefield. Every position is carefully chosen, every angle covered, every potential threat accounted for. Or so they think. "Should we alert Sheriff Harrison?" Marcus asks, watching the display fill with red markers indicating enemy positions. "Not yet," Sarah replies, her voice carrying that deadly calm she developed during combat operations. Let them commit fully to their course. Let them cross lines that can't be uncrossed. Her phone vibrates, signals from observation teams reporting final enemy movements into position. The Steel Serpents are now fully committed, their forces deployed exactly as Sarah predicted they would be. "Look at their formation," she observes, noting patterns in their deployment. Standard combat doctrine, clear fields of fire, overlapping. Coverage, textbook force projection. They think they're establishing perfect tactical position. "And what are they really doing?" Lisa asks quietly. Sarah's smile carries predatory satisfaction. They're arranging themselves for their own defeat. Every position they take, every tactical advantage they think they're establishing, it's all part of a larger plan, our plan. Because some daughters don't just learn to protect what's theirs, they learn to turn an enemy's strength against them, to use their own tactics as weapons, to let their adversaries build the perfect trap, while thinking they're establishing the perfect battlefield. The sun touches the horizon as Sarah makes her final preparations, coordinating hidden assets and positioning response teams. The Steel Serpents think they're about to demonstrate their power through overwhelming force. They haven't realized. They're actually about to learn why some battles are lost before they even begin, orchestrated by someone who knows that true victory often comes not from matching force with force, but from letting your enemy defeat themselves through their own pride and predictability. Darkness settles over Silver Creek Valley as the Steel Serpents begin their coordinated assault. Through night vision feeds, Sarah watches Morrison's forces move with military precision, each team executing their assigned roles in what they believe will be a decisive demonstration of power. First strike teams are moving on supporter properties. In town, Marcus reports, tracking multiple red markers across the tactical display. 4 groups, heavily armed, using standard breach and clear protocols. Right on schedule, Sarah notes, her voice carrying that quiet certainty that comes from having seen this pattern before. They want to isolate us completely, break any remaining support network. Through sophisticated surveillance systems, she watches the Steel Serpents implement their carefully planned operation. Morrison directs from his mobile command center, coordinating teams with professional efficiency. As they move to surround the ranch, heavy weapons teams are in final position on the ridge. Lisa's voice comes through secure comm. They've got clear fields of fire on all approaches. Anyone trying to reach the ranch would be caught in multiple crossfires. Sarah allows herself a small smile as she watches more enemy units move into precisely the positions she's prepared for. They think they're establishing a perfect tactical grid. They haven't realized they're actually walking into a carefully prepared killing zone. The command center's alert system suddenly pings. Multiple triggers activated simultaneously. Sarah switches feeds, watching the Steel Serpent's first teams encounter her carefully laid traps. Group 1 just hit the first surprise at the Thompson place, Marcus reports with barely contained satisfaction. Hidden barriers activated exactly as planned. They're completely blocked in. Through high-resolution cameras, they watch the Steel Serpent's coordinated assault begin to unravel. Teams that should be hitting their targets simultaneously find themselves delayed, divided, and increasingly isolated by seemingly random obstacles and equipment failures. Their communications are starting to break down, Lisa notes, monitoring encrypted channels. Something's interfering with their tactical network. Teams can't coordinate, can't call for support. Amazing how unreliable military surplus equipment can be, Sarah remarks mildly, though her eyes track every development with predatory focus, especially when it's been subtly modified over the past few weeks. James Mitchell studies the tactical display with professional appreciation as more red markers show units in distress. You've turned their own tactical doctrine against them. They're so focused on maintaining their perfect formation that they can't adapt when things go wrong. Pride makes men predictable, Sarah confirms, watching Morrison try to regain control of his rapidly deteriorating operation. They think overwhelming force is always the answer. They haven't learned that sometimes the strongest position is actually the most vulnerable. Through multiple feeds, they watch the Steel Serpents' carefully planned assault transform into increasingly desperate chaos. Teams meant to demonstrate unstoppable power find themselves stuck in dead ends, caught in pre-planned bottlenecks, or simply unable to reach their objectives. Second wave is starting to hesitate, Marcus reports. They can see something's wrong, but can't figure out what. Their whole tactical grid is falling apart. Of course it is. Sarah nods, watching patterns emerge exactly as she predicted. They base their entire plan on standard military doctrine, establish fire superiority, control movement corridors, dominate high ground. But they forgot the first rule of asymmetric warfare. What's that? Lisa asks. When your enemy expects you to fight conventionally, change the rules of engagement entirely. Through sophisticated surveillance systems, they watch Morrison's frustration grow. As more reports of failures flood in, his perfect military operation is dissolving into chaos, but not through direct opposition, through a series of seemingly random equipment failures, unexpected obstacles, and inexplicable technical problems. They're starting to break formation, Marcus observes. Teams pulling back, trying to regroup. Their whole command structure is coming apart. Sarah's expression carries cold satisfaction as she watches the Steel Serpent's coordination collapse. They came expecting to fight a simple ranch operation. They weren't prepared to face someone who knows exactly how to turn their own tactics against them. Because some daughters don't just learn to protect the ranch, they learn to dismantle enemy operations from within, to turn their opponent's strength into weakness, to let their adversaries defeat themselves while thinking they're still in control. The night deepens as Sarah coordinates her hidden assets, watching the Steel Serpent's attempted show of force transform into increasingly desperate chaos. Morrison and his men think they're dealing with simple ranchers, trying to protect their land. They haven't realized they're actually facing someone who's made a career of turning enemy doctrine into the instrument of their own destruction. They'll regroup, James warns, watching Morrison try to salvage his operation. Men like that don't accept defeat easily. Let them, Sarah replies softly, her voice carrying that deadly calm she developed in Force Recon. Let them gather their strength, concentrate their forces, prepare for one decisive push. Her smile carries no warmth now. It'll just make Phase 2 that much more effective. Adrid. Midnight approaches as Morrison rallies his scattered forces back to the Miller warehouse. Through thermal imaging, Sarah watches the Steel Serpents regroup, their movements carrying the desperate energy of wounded pride seeking revenge. They're consolidating everything they have left, Marcus reports, tracking enemy movements across the tactical display, pulling in all teams, even the reserve units. Looks like they're preparing for one massive push. Of course they are, Sarah nods, studying their formation patterns. Men like Morrison only know one response to failure: escalate with overwhelming force. They think if something isn't working, the answer is always more power, more aggression. Through sophisticated surveillance systems, they watch the Steel Serpents prepare for what they believe will be their decisive counterattack. Morrison moves among his men, rallying spirits, restoring confidence through promises of unstoppable force. Final count shows 48 operational bikes, Lisa updates through secure comm. Plus the armored vehicles and whatever heavy weapons they've got left. They're stripping everything for this assault. Sarah allows herself a small smile as she watches them concentrate their forces exactly as she predicted they would. They think they're gathering strength. They haven't realized they're actually making themselves into a perfect target. The command center's alert system pings, movement detected on multiple approaches. Sarah switches feeds, watching the Steel Serpents begin their final preparations. They're arming up with everything they've got, Marcus observes. Military grade, hardware, combat loads, the works. This isn't going to be a show of force anymore. They're going to war. No, Sarah corrects quietly, her eyes tracking enemy movements with predatory focus. They're going to learn why some daughters don't just inherit land. They inherit the knowledge of how to defend it absolutely. Through high-resolution cameras, they watch Morrison coordinate his forces for what he believes will be an overwhelming assault. His movements carry the sharp edge of wounded pride, of a man determined to restore his reputation through sheer destructive power. "Should we alert Sheriff Harrison?" Lisa asks, watching the display fill with concentrated red markers. "Not yet," Sarah replies, her voice carrying that deadly calm she developed during combat operations. "Let them commit fully. Let them cross lines that can't be uncrossed." James Mitchell studies the tactical display with growing concern. They're setting up for a full frontal assault. No more subtle tactics, no more strategic pressure, just pure overwhelming force. "Exactly," Sarah nods, watching patterns emerge precisely as she anticipated. They think they can simply overwhelm any defense through superior numbers and firepower. They've forgotten the most important lesson of asymmetric warfare. Which is, sometimes the most effective defense isn't about matching force with force. It's about turning your enemy's strength into their greatest vulnerability. Through multiple feeds, they watch the Steel Serpents marshal their remaining resources. Morrison has committed everything to this final push, determined to crush any resistance through sheer destructive power. They're moving into attack formation, Marcus reports, tracking enemy movements across the tactical grid. Standard assault pattern. Heavy weapons in support positions, main force in wedge formation, flanking units ready to exploit breakthroughs. "Perfect," Sarah murmurs, watching them arrange themselves exactly as she planned. They're still thinking like conventional military, still following the textbook, still making themselves predictable. Her phone vibrates, signals from observation teams confirming final enemy positions. The Steel Serpents are now fully committed, their forces concentrated exactly where Sarah wants them. "Look at their deployment," she observes, noting patterns in their formation. They've gathered everything into one powerful, striking force, put all their eggs in one basket, thinking it makes them stronger. "And what does it really make them?" Lisa asks quietly. Sarah's smile carries predatory satisfaction. "Vulnerable. They've given us exactly what we need. One clear target, one perfect moment, one chance to end this decisively." Because some daughters don't just learn to protect what's theirs, they learn to turn an enemy's pride into their downfall, to use their adversary's own strength against them, to let them gather their power into one massive force that can be defeated in one decisive stroke. The night deepens as Sarah coordinates her hidden assets, positioning teams for what comes next. The Steel Serpents think they're preparing for an overwhelming demonstration of force. They haven't realized they're actually arranging themselves for their own destruction, orchestrated by someone who knows that true victory often comes not from matching force with force, but from letting your enemy defeat themselves through their own predictability and pride. They'll attack at dawn, Sarah predicts, watching Morrison make his final preparations. They'll want the rising sun behind them, thinking it gives them tactical advantage. One massive push, everything they've got, trying to end this in one decisive blow. Her expression shifts slightly, showing a glimpse of the warrior beneath the rancher's daughter. Let them come. Let them think they've finally found the perfect approach, the unstoppable attack. Let them commit everything to one final push, because when they do, they'll learn why some battles are lost before they even begin. Why some daughters don't just inherit ranches, they inherit the will and the ability to defend them absolutely, no matter what force comes against them. First light creeps over the eastern mountains as the Steel Serpents begin their final assault. Through multiple surveillance feeds, Sarah watches Morrison's forces move out from the Miller warehouse, their formation carrying the deadly purpose of wounded pride seeking vengeance. "They're coming in full force," Marcus reports from his observation. In post, 3 armored vehicles in the lead, bikes flanking in combat formation, Morrison's commanding from the center vehicle personally. "Of course he is," Sarah nods, studying their approach through sophisticated thermal imaging. Men like him always want to be seen leading from the front when they think victory is certain. Pride demands a personal presence. Through high-resolution, in-cameras, they watch the Steel Serpents advance across the valley. Every bike is loaded for combat, every rider armed with military-grade hardware. Morrison has committed everything to this final push, determined to crush any resistance through overwhelming force. "All teams report ready." Lisa's voice comes through secure comm. "Everyone's in position, just waiting for your signal." Sarah allows herself a small smile as she watches the enemy forces move exactly where she wants them. Let them come a bit closer. Let them commit fully to their course. The command center's tactical display shows the Steel Serpents advance in precise detail. Red markers move in perfect military formation, following textbook assault protocols. They think they're executing a flawless attack. They haven't realized they're actually walking into a carefully prepared trap. "They're approaching the first trigger point," Marcus notes, tracking their progress. 10 seconds to optimal position." "All units hold," Sarah commands, her voice carrying that quiet authority that makes even veteran warriors pause. "Wait for them to cross the line of no return." Through sophisticated surveillance systems, they watch Morrison coordinate his assault through hand signals and tactical radio. His movements carry the sharp confidence of someone who believes victory is inevitable through superior force. 5 seconds, Marcus counts down. 4, 3... "Remember," Sarah's voice cuts through all comm channels. "No direct engagement. Let them think they're in control right up until the moment they realize they've already lost." 2, 1. Execute Phase 3. Across the valley, carefully prepared systems activate in precise sequence. First, hidden EMPs disable the armored vehicle's electronics, leaving them stranded in carefully chosen positions. Before the Steel Serpents can react, pre-positioned charges transform the ground beneath their bikes into impassable terrain. First wave neutralized, Marcus reports with professional satisfaction. They're completely immobilized. Through multiple feeds they watch the Steel Serpent's perfect formation dissolve into chaos. Bikes go down in prepared mud traps, communications fail across their entire network, and sophisticated jamming systems leave their weapons' electronic targeting useless. They're trying to regroup, Lisa observes, tracking scattered enemy movements. But they can't coordinate without comms. Their whole command structure is falling apart. Sarah watches Morrison emerge from his disabled vehicle, his face carved with rage and disbelief as his perfect assault crumbles around him. They still think they're fighting a conventional battle. They haven't realized this was never about matching force with force, because some daughters don't just learn to defend the ranch. They learn to turn an enemy's strength against them, to use their own tactics as weapons, to let their adversaries defeat themselves through their own. Pride and predictability. Second phase ready, Marcus reports, as the Steel Serpents struggle to recover. Sheriff Harrison's teams are in position, just waiting for your signal. Not yet, Sarah replies, watching Morrison try to rally his scattered forces. Let them feel the full impact of their failure first. Let them understand exactly how completely they've been outmaneuvered. Through high-resolution cameras, they watch the Steel Serpent's attempted show of force transform into increasingly desperate chaos. Teams that should be providing covering fire find their weapon systems mysteriously malfunctioning. Support units discover their equipment inexplicably disabled. Every backup plan, every contingency, every possible response has been anticipated and countered. They're starting to break, Lisa notes, monitoring enemy communications through their few remaining functional channels. Morrison's losing control. Some of his men are trying to retreat. Perfect, Sarah murmurs, watching the enemy's coordination completely collapse. Now they learn the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the most effective defeat isn't through direct combat, but through letting your enemy destroy themselves while trying to prove their strength. Because some daughters don't just inherit land. They inherit the warrior spirit that knows victory often comes not from winning fights, but from making your enemy defeat themselves while providing proof of their own destruction. The morning sun climbs higher as Sarah prepares for the final phase, watching the Steel Serpents' attempted demonstration of power transform into evidence of their complete defeat. Morrison and his men thought they were executing a perfect assault. They haven't realized they've actually documented their own downfall, orchestrated by someone who learned in Force Recon that the most decisive victories often come not through force of arms, but through turning an enemy's pride into the instrument of their own destruction. Now, Sarah commands softly, show them what real power looks like. Morning light bathes Silver Creek Valley in harsh clarity as Sarah initiates the endgame. Through multiple surveillance feeds, she watches the Steel Serpents' forces dissolve into complete disarray, their perfect military formation now a scattered mess of disabled vehicles and stranded riders. Morrison's trying to establish a defensive position, Marcus reports from his observation post, getting what's left of his mobile units to form a perimeter around the disabled vehicles. Standard combat doctrine, circle the wagons when primary. Assault fails. Still thinking conventionally, Sarah observes, studying their desperate reorganization through thermal imaging, still following the playbook, even when the playbook is what got them into this situation. Through high-resolution cameras, they watch Morrison move among his scattered forces, trying to restore order through sheer force of will. His movements carry the frantic energy of a man watching his perfect plan crumble into disaster. All law enforcement units in final position, Lisa confirms through secure comm. State police tactical teams ready on your signal. FBI surveillance has complete coverage of the area. Sarah allows herself a small smile as she watches the enemy forces bunch together exactly as she predicted they would. Let them concentrate. Let them think they're establishing a stronger defensive position. The command center's tactical display shows the Steel Serpents' deteriorating situation in precise detail. Red markers cluster together, following standard defensive protocols. They think they're protecting themselves. They haven't realized they're actually making themselves into an even better target. Sheriff Harrison reports all access roads secured. Marcus updates, no escape routes left, they're completely contained. Perfect, Sarah murmurs, watching patterns emerge exactly as planned. Now they learn why some daughters don't just inherit ranches, they inherit the knowledge of how to defend them absolutely. Through sophisticated surveillance systems, they watch Morrison realize the true extent of his situation. His forces are immobilized, his communications compromised, his tactical advantage completely neutralized. And now, as law enforcement, units move into position. He's about to learn the final cost of underestimating his opponent. They're spotted the police units, Lisa reports, monitoring the last fragments of enemy communications. Morrison's ordering his men to prepare for resistance. No, Sarah corrects quietly, her voice carrying that deadly calm she developed during combat operations. He's ordering them to provide evidence of criminal intent. Every command, every response, every attempted show of force, it's all being recorded in high definition. Because some daughters don't just learn to protect what's theirs, they learn to turn every enemy action into self-incrimination, every show of force into documented evidence, every attempted demonstration of power into proof of their own criminal behavior. All units in position, Marcus confirms, as police vehicles begin their approach. They're completely surrounded. Through multiple feeds, they watch realization dawn across the Steel Serpents' ranks. Their perfect military operation hasn't just failed, it's transformed into a carefully documented case of organized criminal activity. Morrison's getting desperate, Lisa observes, tracking his movements through thermal imaging. He's realizing there's no way out this time. Sarah watches the Steel Serpents' leader with cold, professional assessment. Men like him always think there's a way out, always believe their training or their force will save them. They never understand that sometimes the most effective trap is the one your enemy walks into willingly. Because some daughters don't just inherit land, they inherit the warrior spirit that knows victory often comes not from winning battles, but from making your enemy defeat themselves while providing proof of their own destruction. Police units moving in, Marcus reports as red and blue lights fill the valley. State police tactical teams taking forward positions. FBI evidence collection units standing by. Sarah watches Morrison's final moments of freedom through high-resolution cameras, noting how his military bearing crumbles as he realizes the true extent of his defeat. Not just tactical failure, but complete strategic destruction. Every action recorded, every threat documented, every criminal intent captured in perfect clarity. Final phase complete, she announces quietly, watching law enforcement units move. In with professional precision. All evidence secured, all escape routes blocked, all documentation transmitted to multiple agencies. Because some daughters don't just learn to defend the ranch, they learn to turn an enemy's own strength into the instrument of their complete destruction, to use their adversaries' tactics as weapons against them, to let them defeat themselves, while providing irrefutable proof of their own criminality. The morning sun climbs higher as Sarah watches the Steel Serpent's final surrender. Their attempted demonstration of power transformed into evidence of their total defeat. Morrison and his men thought they were executing a perfect military operation. They never realized they were actually documenting their own downfall, orchestrated by someone who learned in Force Recon that the most decisive victories often come not through force of arms, but through letting your enemy destroy themselves through their own pride and predictability. "It's over," Marcus observes, as police units begin processing arrests. "No," Sarah corrects softly, her eyes tracking Morrison as he's led away in handcuffs. "Now the real work begins. Now we build something stronger from what they tried to destroy." Or, because some daughters don't just protect what's theirs, they transform every attack into an opportunity to build something better. Every threat into a chance to strengthen their community, every attempted destruction into the foundation of something that can never be broken. 2 weeks after the Steel Serpents' fall, Silver Creek Valley pulses with renewed life. Sarah stands on her front porch, watching the morning sun paint long shadows across land that's been transformed not just by conflict, but by the strength that emerged from it. "Final reports are in from the FBI," Marcus approaches, holding a thick folder. "They're calling it the most successful organized crime takedown in regional history. Steel Serpent's entire network dismantled across 3 states. Sarah nods, noting how the valley's morning rhythms have returned to normal, though now carrying a different kind of strength. And Morrison, facing multiple federal charges. His military background actually worked against him, made the organized nature of their operations even more obvious, looking at 20 years minimum. Through the morning mist, Sarah watches ranch hands go about their duties with renewed purpose. The Steel Serpents' attempt to break their community had instead forged it into something stronger. "Town council meeting yesterday was interesting," Lisa reports, joining them on the porch. "They're implementing some of your security recommendations, creating a valley-wide network, coordinating resources, building something bigger than just individual ranches." "Of course they are," Sarah replies softly. "They've learned what we learned. The true strength isn't just in defending what's yours, but in building something worth protecting." The sound of approaching vehicles draws their attention. Through force of habit, Sarah analyzes engine sounds, identifying Sheriff Harrison's patrol car, along with several other official vehicles. "State police want to establish a permanent liaison," Harrison announces, climbing the porch steps. "FBI's talking about using Silver Creek as a model for rural community defense networks, even the Pentagon's showing interest." Sarah allows herself a small smile. Let them study, let them analyze. They won't find what they're really looking for in reports and tactical assessments. "And what's that?" Harrison asks. "The understanding that real security isn't about force or weapons or tactical advantage." Sarah gestures toward the valley, where ranchers and townspeople move with new purpose. "It's about building something stronger than any attack, creating connections that can't be broken, transforming every threat into an opportunity to grow." Through the morning light, they watch more vehicles arrive, not just law enforcement. Now, but community leaders, ranch owners, people drawn by the story of how one valley stood against organized crime and emerged stronger. "They're not just coming to learn about defense," James Mitchell observes, joining his daughter. "They're coming to understand something bigger." Sarah nods, watching their visitors with quiet assessment. "They want to know how we turned their attack into our victory, how we used their strength against them, how we transformed their attempt at destruction into the foundation of something better. Because some daughters don't just inherit land. They inherit the wisdom to know that true victory often comes not from winning battles, but from building something that makes battles unnecessary." Got more calls from other communities, Marcus reports. They're asking about implementing similar programs, creating their own networks. Help them, Sarah directs. Share what we've learned. Show them it's not just about defense, it's about transformation. Through the morning air, they hear the sounds of construction as the valley rebuilds, not just restoring what was, but creating something new. Every repair carries purpose. Every improvement adds strength. Every change builds towards something larger than individual ranches or properties. You've started something here, Harrison observes, watching the activity. Something bigger than just stopping the Steel Serpents. No, Sarah corrects gently. We've all started something. Everyone who stood together, everyone who chose to build instead of break, everyone who understood that the best way to fight darkness isn't with more darkness. It's with building something worth bringing into the light. The morning progresses as more visitors arrive, each drawn by the story of how one valley transformed an attack into an opportunity for growth. Sarah moves among them with that liquid grace that speaks of combat training, but now it carries a different purpose, not for fighting, but for building. Because some daughters don't just learn to protect what's theirs. They learn to transform every threat into a chance for growth, every attack into an opportunity for strengthening connections, every attempt at destruction into the foundation of something that can never be broken. The sun climbs higher over Silver Creek Valley, illuminating not just a ranch being rebuilt, but a community being strengthened. And at its heart, a daughter who proved that sometimes the most powerful force isn't in destruction or resistance, but in the patient, dedicated act of building something worth protecting. For in the end, that's what the Steel Serpents never understood, that some daughters don't just inherit land. They inherit the wisdom, the will, and the warrior spirit to transform it into something greater than it was before. Not just a ranch to be defended, but a legacy to be built upon, a foundation for something that grows stronger with every challenge it faces, and in that transformation lies the greatest victory of all. A month after the Steel Serpent's downfall, Sarah Mitchell stands in what was once her hidden command center, now transformed into something different. The sophisticated surveillance equipment remains, but alongside it stands new technology. Training systems, communication networks, tools not just for defense, but for building something larger. Latest groups arriving, Marcus announces, entering with his usual quiet efficiency. Veterans from 3 states, law enforcement, ranch owners, all wanting to learn what we built here. Sarah nods, watching through the windows as vehicles pull up to the main house. Each arrival carries the same look she remembers seeing in her own mirror years ago, the weight of battles fought, the hope of something better to build. They're not just coming for security training anymore, Lisa observes, joining them. They're coming to understand something bigger. Of course they are, Sarah replies softly. Because what we built here isn't just about defense or tactics or military doctrine. It's about transformation, about turning strength meant for war into something that builds peace. Through sophisticated monitoring systems, she watches the new arrivals gather. Former soldiers carrying the same shadows she once did, law enforcement officers seeking to protect their communities, ranchers looking to build something stronger than fences and walls. State police implementation program is going well, Sheriff Harrison reports, entering with fresh updates. 6 counties have already adopted our network model. FBI's talking about making it a national template. Sarah allows herself a small smile as she watches more vehicles arrive. Let them implement, let them study, but make sure they understand the most important part. Which is? That true security isn't built through force or fear. Sarah's voice carries that quiet certainty that makes even veteran warriors listen. It's built through community, through connection, through transforming every potential threat into an opportunity to grow stronger together. Because some daughters don't just inherit land, they inherit the wisdom to know that the strongest defense isn't in walls or weapons, but in building something so worth protecting that the whole community stands together to preserve it. Got. Word from Montana, Marcus updates. Steel Serpents' remaining chapters are dissolving. Without Morrison's leadership, without their support network, they're falling apart from within. Of course they are, Sarah nods. They built their power through force and fear. Take those away, and there's nothing left to hold them together. Through the morning light, they watch as new groups arrive for training, not just in tactical response or security measures, but in something more fundamental: how to transform a community from vulnerable individuals into connected strength. You've created something unique here, Harrison observes, watching the activity. Not just a defense network, but a whole new way of thinking about community security. We all created it, Sarah corrects gently. Everyone who stood together when the Steel Serpents came. Everyone who chose to build something stronger instead of just fighting back. Everyone who understood that true victory isn't in defeating enemies. It's in building something that makes enemies unnecessary. The day progresses as Sarah leads training sessions, sharing not just tactical knowledge, but deeper wisdom. She teaches them how to turn military skills into community strengths, how to transform combat experience into protective insight, how to build something that grows stronger with every challenge it faces. Because some daughters don't just learn to protect what's theirs, they learn to create something larger than themselves, something that turns every threat into an opportunity, every attack into a chance to build stronger connections. They'll write reports about this, James observes, watching his daughter work. Try to analyze how one ranch managed to coordinate with federal agencies, how a therapy center became the cornerstone of a major criminal takedown. Let them write, Sarah replies, moving among the trainees with that liquid grace that now serves a different purpose. Let them study, but they won't find what really matters in reports. What's that? That the strongest weapon against violence isn't more violence. Her voice carries quiet certainty. It's building something so worth protecting that people will stand together to defend it. Not with force, but with community, with purpose. With the kind of strength that comes from healing instead of hurting. The sun climbs higher over Silver Creek Valley, illuminating not just a ranch being strengthened, but a legacy being built. And at its heart, a daughter who proved that sometimes the most powerful force isn't in destruction or resistance, but in the patient, dedicated act of building something worth preserving. Because in the end, that's what the Steel Serpents never understood, that some daughters don't just inherit land. They inherit the wisdom to transform it into something greater than it was before. Not just a ranch to be defended, but a foundation for something that grows stronger with every challenge it faces. And in that transformation lies the greatest victory of all, not just the defeat of one enemy, but the creation of something that makes future enemies think twice. Not just the protection of one ranch, but the building of a legacy that will endure long after the battles are forgotten. For in Silver Creek Valley, they've learned the truth that some daughters have always known, that true strength isn't in how well you fight, but in how well you build. And what they've built here will stand as a testament to that truth for generations to come. The end. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.